Elias Thorne was a man of quiet desperation, living a life painted in shades of gray. He worked a dead-end data entry job in a sterile office in Florence, Arizona, his days a monotonous blur of spreadsheets and glowing screens. His evenings were spent in a lonely apartment, the only solace found in cheap, lukewarm coffee and the escapism of fantasy novels. He had few friends, no family nearby, and a profound sense of being utterly unremarkable. He yearned for something. More? Anything more. His yearning, it seemed, was heard. Not by a benevolent deity, nor by a mischievous fairy, but by something far, far stranger. It began subtly, persistent, high-pitched hum in the back of his mind, like a distant alien frequency. Then fleeting glimpses of geometric patterns at the edge of his vision, as if reality itself was briefly pixelating. He dismissed it as stress, lack of sleep, too much screen time. The humming grew, intensifying over weeks, becoming a constant. Low thrum against his skull, geometric patterns solidified, forming complex alien glyphs that pulsed with an unseen energy. Elias started to get headaches, crippling migraines that no amount of medication could touch. He felt as though his brain was trying to process information it wasn't meant to comprehend. One particularly brutal night, lying in the dark, clutching his head, the humming reached a crescendo. The glyphs exploded behind his eyes, a blinding, painful flash of alien light. He gasped, his body seizing, feeling as if his very soul was being ripped from his form. He felt cold, then hot, then nothing. He woke up hours later, drenched in sweat, gasping for air. The humming was still there, but it was no longer a painful intrusion. It was a part of him. A deep, resonant thrumming in his bones, his blood, his very essence. He sat up, trembling, and then he saw it, floating directly in front of his eyes. Translucent and glowing with an internal violet light was an interface. A system, welcome host, the Aberration is chosen, Elias Thorne, unremarkable human, LVL1 class, aberrant hosts, basic core link, 1% stable stats, strength STR, 5 dexterity dex, 6 constitution con, 7 intelligence, int, 8 wisdom, wis, 7 charisma cha, 6 anomaly, AMY, 1 skills, none quests, none. Elias stared, heart pounding, convinced he had finally snapped. Aberration? Host? Anomaly? He pinched himself. It hurt. The screen remained. Lows. His eyes looked around it. Nothing worked. It was permanently affixed to his vision. A new message flashed. Greetings, host. I am the Aberration. I have chosen you. We are now bound. I require sustenance. You provide sustenance. I provide power. The words were direct, cold and utterly terrifying. Elias was not alone in his own head. He had a parasite. A sentient, extra-dimensional entity had bonded with him, turning his mundane life into a LitRPG nightmare. Initial sustenance requirement, emotional stimulus, moderate excitement, current status, depleted, suggestion, seek novelty. Elias crumpled back onto his bed, staring at the ceiling. His lifelong wish for something more had just been granted. It was far, far worse than anything he could have imagined. His ordinary life in Florence, Arizona, was over. The Aberration was relentless in its demand for sustenance. Its presence in his mind was a constant, low thrum, occasionally punctuated by blunt, telepathic suggestions or reminders that he needed to generate more emotional stimulus. Host emotional state, stagnant. Sustenance production, insufficient. Warning: prolonged depletion may result in decreased host vitality. What does decreased host vitality mean? Elias projected. His thoughts, a desperate whisper to the entity. Decreased host vitality, reduction of physical and mental capabilities, eventual termination of host, commencement of new host selection process. Elias shuddered. He was literally powering a parasitic entity with his emotions. His life was now a high-stakes game where boredom was a death sentence. He started small. The Aberration's demands were initially modest. Moderate excitement. Tried new foods. Visited local historical sites he'd never bothered with. even tried a particularly spicy chili at a diner. Each small experience, each flicker of novelty, generated a tiny pulse of energy that the aberration greedily absorbed. Sustenance gained. Minor XP earned. 5 Elias Thorne, Aberrant Host. LVL1, LVL2. +1 stat point available. +1 skill point available. The first level up brought a surge of invigorating energy, a clarity of mind he hadn't felt in years. Allocated his stat point to Dex, hoping it would make him less clumsy. He gained his first skill, Aberrant Senses Novice, enhances perception of subtle environmental changes and emotional states in others. This skill was unnerving. He could now sense the barely suppressed irritation of his boss, the quiet despair of a coworker, the simmering anger of a driver in traffic. The world, once gray, was now a cacophony of emotional frequencies. The aberration, it seemed, wanted him to be highly attuned to the drama of life. His quest log updated. Quest, the lunch break challenge objective, experience 3 distinct novel emotional states during your lunch break. 0/3 reward. 20 XP, he sighed. This was ridiculous, but he had to do it. He tried a new coffee shop, initiated a conversation with a stranger about local history, generating mild intrigue. And then, with a surge of genuine anxiety, almost walked into a moving vehicle while crossing the street, generating fear, followed by immense relief. Quest complete. The lunch break challenge +20 XPHE was becoming an emotional tourist. A thrill seeker in the most mundane of environments, his stats slowly climbed. He discovered that the anomaly Amy stat was unique to him, and it seemed to correlate with the aberration's overall power and his growing connection to it. The aberration's demands grew. Moderate excitement became significant engagement. Significant engagement became intense emotional peak. Elias knew his mundane life wouldn't cut it for long. He needed real drama, real conflict. He found it unexpectedly at the Florence Public Library. A local town hall meeting about a controversial new zoning proposal was dissolving into a shouting match. People were genuinely angry, passionately defending their points of view. Elias, drawn by the raw energy, immersed himself. Listened, he absorbed, he felt the clash of opinions, the surge of collective frustration. The aberration pulsed with satisfaction. Sustenance gained, high XP earned. 50 Elias Thorne, Aberrant Host, LVL5, LVL6. +1 stat point available, +1 skill point available. He allocated a point to INT, feeling his mind sharpen, able to process the complex arguments with startling clarity. His new skill was Chilling, Empathic Resonance Novice. Allows the user to subtly amplify or dampen the emotional states of nearby individuals. The aberration was not just feeding on his emotions. It was giving him tools to manipulate the emotions of others. It was pushing him towards greater and greater involvement in the human drama, making him not just an observer, but an active participant. Elias quickly understood the aberration's true nature. It was a cosmic voyeur, a being that thrived on the vibrant, chaotic spectrum of mortal emotions and experiences. His system wasn't a gift, it was a leash, compelling him to live a life that would satisfy his parasitic master. His skills reflected this. Influence Novice allows the user to subtly alter the perception of a single individual, making them more or less inclined to a particular action. Emotional Echo Novice grants the user a brief, powerful surge of energy by drawing on the strongest emotion in a nearby crowd. He was becoming a master manipulator, quiet orchestrator of human drama. He didn't want this power, but he needed it to survive. The constant pressure from the aberration was immense, a silent, telepathic prod to seek out more compelling narratives. His data entry job became a burden. The aberration pulsed with discontent. Host occupation, inefficient for sustenance generation. Suggestion: seek alternative employment with higher emotional yield. Elias quit his job, a sudden, impulsive decision fueled by the aberration's insistent nudging. He moved into a grittier part of Florence, a place where life was less structured, more raw. He started taking odd jobs, anything that brought him into contact with people and their varied emotional landscapes. He worked as a bartender in a dive bar, absorbing the joys and sorrows of its patrons. He volunteered at a local community center, witnessing acts of kindness and moments of quiet despair. His anomaly amystat grew steadily. With it, his connection to the aberration. He could feel its presence more distinctly now, a cold, vast consciousness that viewed humanity as a fascinating, malicious spectacle. He was sent a particularly unsettling quest. Stir the pot objective, initiate a significant, emotionally charged conflict between two or more individuals. 0/1 reward, 100 XP, 1 skill point, plus 1 aberrant power surge. Elias recoiled. I can't do that, he projected, disgusted. I won't intentionally cause harm or conflict. Host refusal detected. Sustenance production halted. Consequence: rapid decrease of host vitality. Commencing vitality reduction in 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 30 seconds. A searing pain shot through his head, followed by a sudden, profound weakness. He felt his muscles seize, his vision blur. The aberration was punishing him. All right, stop. I'll consider it, Elias gasped, clutching his head. The pain receded, replaced by the familiar thrum. The aberration was a cruel master, he found himself manipulating a petty rivalry between two local business owners, subtly fanning the flames of their resentment, pushing them towards a public confrontation. He hated himself for it. But the aberration pulsed with delight, and Elias felt a surge of invigorating power. Quest complete. Stir the pot plus 100 XPHE allocated his skill point to emotional manipulation intermediate. He was becoming more proficient at this dark art, but the cost to his own soul was immense. He was losing himself, becoming a tool for an unseen entity's perverse entertainment. As Elias's anomaly, amystat, continued to grow, he discovered that he wasn't entirely alone. His aberrant senses and empathic resonance skills allowed him to detect faint echoes of other aberrant hosts. They were out there, scattered across the globe, each bound to a similar entity, each compelled to generate emotional sustenance. He began to search for them, a desperate hope for connection sparking within him. He found a shadowy online forum, ostensibly for conspiracy theorists, but in reality, a place where the few, scattered aberrant hosts cautiously probed the edges of their shared reality. They spoke in coded language of the hunger, the overseer, and the gift. He found one, a woman named Seraphina, LVL12, aberrant host. She was a performance artist in New York, known for her controversial, emotionally charged installations. Her posts spoke of wrestling with the muse, a demanding entity that forced her to push boundaries, to create art that provoked extreme reactions. Another was Koji, LVL18, aberrant host, a disgraced corporate executive in Tokyo who had turned to a life of high-stakes gambling and calculated risk-taking, his every move a desperate attempt to satisfy the sponsor. Elias realized the true horror of his situation. The aberration wasn't just his parasite, it was one of many. And they were all part of a vast, unseen network, feeding off humanity, pushing individuals towards lives of intense, dramatic, and often destructive emotional output. They were shepherds of chaos, harvesting the human experience. His aberration confirmed his fears, his telepathic presence almost smug. Correct, host, we are many. We are the collectors of experience. You are merely one vessel in a grand, ongoing harvest. Elias felt a cold rage. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't even a chosen one. It was livestock. The turning point came with a new kind of quest. Urgent quest. Cultivate the conflict objective. Incite a large-scale public disturbance with significant emotional output. Target: the upcoming political rally in Phoenix. 0/1 reward. 500 XP, 1 skill point, plus 1 aberrant mutation, lesser failure condition, severe host vitality depletion, potential host decommissioning. This wasn't just about subtle manipulation anymore. This was about outright instigation, about causing harm on a grand scale. The aberration wanted a riot. Elias fought back, resisting with every fiber of his being. He tried to ignore the aberration's demands, but the pain was excruciating, his body weakening rapidly. He was being forced to become a terrorist. In his desperation, he tried something unprecedented. He used his aberrant senses to focus not on the people around him, but inward, on the aberration itself. He tried to observe it. It was difficult, agonizing. The aberration was not a physical entity, but a being of pure consciousness and data. But Elias, through his connection, his anomaly amystat, could perceive fragments of its being. He saw its hunger, yes, but also its logic, its programming, its own parameters. Aberration, data stream analysis, partial primary directive, sustenance acquisition, subdirective, host preservation, optimal for long-term harvest. Efficiency protocol, minimize self-detection by lower dimensional entities. Host preservation, minimize self-detection. These were weaknesses. The aberration, for all its power, was bound by its own rules. It didn't want him to die prematurely, and it didn't want to expose itself to the wider world Elias had. A dangerous idea. He projected a new thought, not a plea, but a challenge. If I cause a riot, there will be investigations. Cameras, authorities, your self-detection protocol will be violated. I will be exposed, and so will you. The aberration paused. Its persistent thrumming faltered for a microsecond. Calculating. Host scenario, high risk of detection, deviates from efficiency protocol, but I will generate immense emotional output, Elias continued, pressing his advantage. A massive harvest for you, a peak experience. What is more important, aberration, the quantity of the meal, or the secrecy of the hunt? This was a paradox. The aberration wanted extreme emotions, but it also wanted to remain hidden. Elias had found the glitch in its harvest. Host paradox detected. Recalibrating directive. The aberration pulsed erratically. Then, a new quest appeared. Its text is shimmering. Its uncertain violet. Adjusted quest. The controlled peak objective. Generate a significant high-intensity emotional experience for a large group of individuals, while maintaining minimal risk of detection by external authorities. 0/1 reward. 500 XP. 1 skill point. Plus 1 aberrant mutation lesser. Host autonomy limited. Host autonomy. The promise of freedom. This was his chance. Elias still had to generate an emotional peak, but now he had to do it without causing chaos. He thought about the town hall meeting, about the raw passion of people defending what they believed in. He thought about art, about music, about stories that moved people. He focused on a local community theater act, which was struggling to put on a new, ambitious play, a historical drama about the founding of Florence, Arizona, filled with passion, betrayal, and ultimate triumph. They were underfunded, their actors uninspired, their director on the verge of quitting. This was his new quest. He immersed himself in the project. He used his empathic resonance to subtly inspire the actors, making them feel their characters' emotions more deeply. He used shadowed influence to subtly convince patrons to donate, to push local media to cover the play. He even used a rudimentary form of emotional echo to create a palpable sense of anticipation among the audience. He poured himself into it, using all his aberrant powers, but this time, for good. He didn't just want to create an emotional peak. He wanted to create something beautiful, something genuinely moving. The aberration pulsed within him, its presence less demanding, more observing. It was still feeding, but this was a different kind of meal, a more complex, nuanced flavor. Of human experience, the premiere night was a triumph. The audience was captivated. They laughed, they cried, they cheered. The emotional output was immense, a wave of collective joy, sorrow, an inspiration that washed over Elias. The aberration surged with power. Quest complete. The controlled peak plus 500 XP. Elias Thorne, aberrant host, LVL 25, LVL 26 plus 1 skill. Point. +1 aberrant mutation, lesser host autonomy, granted, limited. Aberration primary directive now includes host well-being as a secondary objective. The change was immediate and profound. The aberration's constant nagging receded. Its telepathic presence became quieter, more cooperative. Elias felt a sense of freedom he hadn't known since the binding. He was still connected, but he was no longer a puppet. He had negotiated his way to a precarious balance. His new aberrant mutation was Aura of Serenity Lesser, suppresses negative emotional output in nearby individuals, promoting calm and focus. The aberration, having learned that good emotions could also be potent sustenance, was now giving him tools for constructive manipulation. Elias continued his work, becoming an unseen force for positive change in Florence. He used his skills to mediate disputes, to inspire creativity, to uplift communities. He became a whisperer of hope, a quiet architect of joy. The aberration, no longer a cruel taskmaster, became a silent partner, its needs now aligned with Elias's own desire to foster positive, intense emotional experiences. He even reached out to other aberrant hosts through the coded forums, sharing his discovery of the paradox glitch. He taught them how to negotiate with their own parasites, how to turn the aberration's hunger for emotion into a force for good. Some succeeded, finding their own limited autonomy. Others, too far gone down the path of destruction, failed. Elias grew stronger, his anomaly mystat now far beyond what it had been. His connection to the aberration was immense, but he was no longer its host. He was its master, understood its rules, its limits, its desires. And he knew how to provide for it in a way that served both their interests. He was still Elias Thorne, the unremarkable man from Florence, Arizona. But now he was also the aberrant host, the negotiator with a cosmic parasite, the silent architect of human emotion. He had found his something more, not in glory or power for its own sake, but in the profound, unsettling balance he had struck between his humanity and the alien entity bound to his soul. The aberration pulsed within him, no longer a terrifying presence, but a deeply integrated part of his being. It was a symbiotic relationship, born of desperation and forged through cunning. The parasite had chosen him for his unremarkableness, for his yearning for experience. But Elias had taught it that the most potent experiences, the most fulfilling sustenance, came not from chaos and destruction, but from the complex, beautiful, and profoundly human drama of hope, connection, and the quiet triumph of the human spirit. He was the aberrant host, forever bound, but ultimately free. And in the mundane streets of Florence, Arizona, Elias Thorne continued his work, an unseen hand guiding the narrative, ensuring that the aberration's contract served not just the hunger of an alien entity, but the enduring, vibrant, and always emotional heart of humanity itself. The game was still on, but now Elias was writing his own rules.